Hello, everybody. Welcome to UAP Book Club at Quantum Witch Cafe. Thank you so much to everybody in the chat for joining. And as usual, this is your place to talk about anything wild, strange. Well, not wild. Well, maybe wild. Strange, UFO, UAP if you're the fancy people, which everybody here is fancy. So UAP, I guess. Today we have a small club. We have Nathan, Graham, Vinny, and Jay. And we are going to be talking about Project Beta, which I have on my phone, so I can't hold up the book because I got it on Kindle. There we go. Perfect. I'm going to start off with how we usually start off, making fun of Jay. I'm just kidding. We did that already. Just the comments, my comments on the book, and then we'll just go around saying what you thought about the book and kind of like your grand overview of it, I guess. And I need to write a review for this one because I got it on Amazon, and after meeting Graham, I know how important reviews are. Now I know authors, so they're like, you got to write a review. But to me, this is what I wrote for the review. Project Beta is an in-depth history about the birth of disinformation that was formed, as Greg puts it, as the modern UFO myth. The book has key figures such as Richard Doty and Paul Bennewitz and other people that were doing this sort of disinformation at the time. And they also kind of became questionable after this. But Greg writes it historically and as it happened, which I always appreciate. I thought it was the first thing I thought was, of course, it's crazy because it has all the different phenomena happening. It has the cattle mutilations, it has the abductions, and then we have like government men in black, So it has a little bit of everything, and he writes it very well. So those are my quick impressions of Project Beta.
Who wants to go next? Yeah, Nathan.
All right, fine. So I enjoyed the book a lot. I think this book is a very timely sort of conversation, particularly where we are with this topic today, where we're on the cusp of potential whistleblower legislation that may make some room for folks who've been involved with these programs to come forward and share what they know. I think it's an important book for anyone that has a serious interest in this topic because it reveals the deep complexity that is inherent in the study of UFOs and the assorted phenomena, some of which you mentioned, Priscilla. Also, the degree to which our government, the U.S. government anyway, is deeply involved in this topic, not only for an interest in it of itself, but also for ulterior interest in using the UFO sort of interest and fanaticism as a kind of smokescreen for other activities that the U.S. government has been and is currently involved with. And I think it's an important lesson for all of us to be mindful of, particularly those of us who are in conversation with folks that may be really close to some secrets, quote unquote, just how complex and challenging this topic can be to parse the truth from the fiction. I also think it's a good reminder in terms of, how heavily invested a person can get in a certain way of thinking about this. And you can really craft an entire world out of maybe very little actual information, and how that can be in the wrong hands, very destabilizing and harmful to oneself and even to those that care about you. So I think it's helpful to kind of keep this story, a real story, in mind as anyone who has an interest in this is pursuing it seriously.
Yeah, I was interested to see how Greg would actually approach the contentious subject of Mr. R. Doty. As somebody who's met him twice this year now, both sides of actually reading this book, if you like, I was struck by, if you meet him, he's human. And then was Greg going to do a hatchet job on him? Was it going to be a kind of, just a hit piece on how bad he is and how bad he is for ufology? And actually, I was struck by something that Greg said towards the end of the book, and this is just one little bit, where he said, look, nothing's just black and white in ufology. And people like to think it is. And there's quite a lot of people who say, look, no, it's this, or no, it's that. And there's no in between. But actually, when it comes down to it, there's shades of grey. And like everything else in life, there are shades of grey, there are differences. It's not just one side or the other. So it was quite illuminating to see that somebody did actually share that point of view, something that I've held for quite a long time. And just as Nathan said, how easy it is to fall down a rabbit hole when you believe in something so strongly, but then you're fed information that appeals to your worldview. It reinforces that belief, and actually not just reinforces it, but strengthens it, and actually sends you down the rabbit hole even further, looking for things which necessarily may not be there, but because somebody points in the right direction, feeds you a little bit of maybe true information, but with misinformation sort of mixed in, because the biggest lies are always best between two truths, if you like. Then it's a good way to actually misdirect people, especially if there were things that the military and other three-letter agencies, you name it, they might have been involved, were actually trying to hide or didn't want to be discovered. And far better to get somebody who they can discredit, who they can who misinform and push in a different direction. So yes, this was a very important book. I take the point about Nathan said about the parallels between now, because we have new whistleblowers, people who are coming forward saying that they have answers. They may not have the full picture, but how much do we trust them? How much do we take on board what they say? How much do we invest ourselves in their message? And that's a lesson that, yes, okay, in the past people have said that they're involved and they know this and that, and they have some of the answers, but how much do we trust them?
All right, Jay or Vinny can go. You guys can.
You want to have a nice off, Vinny?
Let's go in order,
Oh
dude.
my
Come on, man.
Only if you crack another LaCroix or I can't say it right.
LaCroix.
LaCroix.
All right, I'll go. Let's see. I really deeply appreciated the book. I met Greg earlier this year at the archives of the Impossible Conference and was on a panel with him, and found him to be a really a brilliant and understated guy, and I really enjoyed speaking with him there. And the book itself, it's pretty harrowing, right? It's harrowing as somebody that's involved in the field. It's harrowing because the whole book is a warning, essentially, to folks like us in many ways. And you're two of the biggest, we won't say bad guys, because Greg actually is relatively clinical about how he approaches kind of judgment calls with regard to national security work and things like that, and he's pretty careful about that. But these Bill Moore and Richard Doty kind of have two distinct roles here, in that Richard Doty is essentially running a disinformation scheme for this guy Paul Bennewitz, who lives and works in direct proximity to an Air Force base. And he's an engineer that has all sorts of hobbyist equipment and is like throwing all sorts of like sensory equipment towards this Air Force base. And so on a kind of overarching level, from the outset and from the outside, you can see why folks at the Air Force Base, Richard Doty and other people like that, would be looking at this guy and being like, we should really follow this. You know what I mean? There was a there in terms of the guy was also doing work with the Navy and the Air Force, Paul Bennewitz. And he was also a very earnest individual who thought he had a patriotic duty to report to the Air Force that he believed that there were extraterrestrial craft in his estimation and things like that, kind of buzzing the property and doing all sorts of things. So, I can understand from Greg's book that I can see both sides of the issue in some ways. However, by the end of the book, you see Richard Doty, that Paul Bennewitz was left a very broken man in many ways. And you hear consistently Richard Doty speaking out of at least two sides of his mouth consistently. The other kind of quote unquote bad guy would be Bill Moore, who was a prominent ufologist researcher back in the day, who it turned out was feeding information back to intelligence community about other ufology researchers, who was kind of feeding half truths out and things like that. But he eventually confessed at a big MUFON convention, I think in 89 or 90. And so, it's a cautionary tale, the whole book. And it's the kind of situation where you read a book like that and it's alarming because you wonder, this is the 80s and here we are 35 years later. And you can't help but wonder with a little bit of paranoia, how much of this is happening now? How much of this will continue to happen in the future? What have we missed from other people over the last years in the intervening amount of time? And it's one of the reasons why I kind of stay away from craft for the most part. You know what I mean? I stick directly to talking with experiencers and things like that. And it's partially because when I used to do work with Richard Dolan for his members site, I would see emails from people that were like wanting to talk about experimental propulsion and all this stuff. And I would just be like, like all three monkeys, like, no, I don't want to see it. I don't want to hear it. I don't want anything to do with it, because the closer, it feels like to me anyway, like the closer you get to that, that side of things, the more potentially of a hall of mirrors you find yourself in.
Yeah, really well said. I think my kind of, this might sound slightly controversial, but what I'm going to do is not put everything that I believe in the past. I thought, Richard Doty was to blame for everything that happened to Paul Bennewitz. And what I learned from this book is there's so much more, there's so many more intricacies to it than that Paul Bennewitz was entrenched in this subject way before he met Richard Doty. He was a member of APRO. He had some really serious beliefs when he encountered Myrna Hansen in 1980, who was, had seen lights and experienced something. And Paul Bennewitz started putting together these really strong belief systems about aliens way before he met Richard Doty. And he seemed very adamant about these aliens as well, that they were here for this and that, and it was fairly negative. Now, I always assumed that Doty had planted these seeds in Bennewitz. He was just a scientist who had seen lights and it was quite innocent. But no, it really shocked me that it was a lot more deeper than that. And then you add in the whole huge cattle mutilation aspect to this story, which I did not know was there until this book. Then you add in people like Leo Sprinkle, Bill Moore, as you say, and the web just gets bigger and bigger and more difficult to kind of put the finger on one person for this and that. And that's really what opened it up to me. And it doesn't make Doty, it doesn't put him in a good light, any more than I sort of held him in this one position before. But it certainly, it doesn't make the conversation as black and white as like Doty is to blame for this. It's really more than that for me. So yeah, it was interesting.
Before you guys go on, we have Greg is joining us early and he's ready to go. So we've got people in the audience saying, I hope Greg pops on. So this is the surprise, guys. And I'm going to welcome Greg to Quantum Witch Cafe to talk about his amazing book, Project Beta, that is definitely something you need to read if you plan on being in UFO world at all. So welcome, Greg. Thank you so much for coming. Yay. Yes, we can hear you. Thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to hop on with us. Your book was a big eye-opener for me. I kind of knew a little bit about all the individuals, but after reading your book, I feel like I have a more complete picture. So thank you for writing such an amazing book.
Well, thanks. I had a lot of
fun. Oh. I'm sorry. I meant to mute myself. My goodness. I'm so sorry.
It was kind of an incredible trip to write that book. And I was just, the only reason I wrote it is because I proposed it to Patrick Quige at, what did he have? Paraview Press. And he had a deal with Pocket Books, which is Simon & Schuster. He was looking for projects and he said, well, throw 3 projects at me. And that was the one of the things I proposed. And he said, well, yeah, that's the one you should do. And when I started writing it, he said, write it like a movie, write it like a story, so it flows like a story. That's why it basically starts. I've specifically started it with the dark and stormy night kind of thing, just almost as a trope, but it worked very well for the opening of the book. I mean, it opens with, lightning hitting the top of this mountain or whatever. It almost, this mad scientist looking thing. So, yeah, I found out. So let me turn off my dinger on my phone. I found out so many things working on that book that I just would not have expected. I knew Bill Moore. I had known him since 1987 when I was a little kid, and thought, oh, UFOs are fun. You know, I haven't really been into them since I was a kid. And this was when I was right out of college. So I just happened to work down the street from Bill Moore in an office. And I found out his office was a block away from me in Hollywood. So I went and visited him, and we became friends. And, you know, he was the one that basically gave me entry to talk to all these people about the book for the book. So, you know, he got me in touch with people from intelligence and Doty and Gabe Valdez, even the New Mexico State Highway Patrolman, who became a very good friend. I used to go out and visit him and his family. They're always very nice to me. And when Gabe passed away, I went to his funeral. And I made a lot of friends actually working on that book, a lot of friends in New Mexico who are still friends of mine. And I may move to New Mexico eventually. I just like it there. And I'd been going there since I was in my 20s anyway. I just like it. And so it seemed like the book was almost a natural progression for me to do, because I was familiar with the area and knew a few people there. So, but yeah, it's as I can't remember which one of you said this, but you said it was almost like a lesson. It should be learned to read that, because you get an idea of what the motivations are behind any kind of release from the government. I'm very cynical about any kind of information coming from the government. What I think it's, to me, it's always, okay, what are they pulling now? You know, what do they want us to believe in furtherance of whatever? Because I really think deeply that, and I thought this from the beginning, that the New York Times article and everything else had little to do with the UFOs and mostly to do with defense and intelligence stuff that we probably won't ever know anything about. And apparently they're trying to back out of it now and say that, well, there were Chinese drones or something, which is what happens every time. There's a bait and switch every time this happens. It happened I think in the 50s, 60s, 80s. I can't cite exactly but I'm sure you guys can think of these things when they happened. But, you know, like the Condon report, it's you know, we're going to finally get the government, you know, to talk about this. And it was kind of fixed from the beginning. They just wanted to kind of keep people away from it because they couldn't explain it. And I still think they can't explain it, but it can be used. It can be used for, you know, intelligence purposes or propaganda purposes or whatever. So that's why I'm really careful about it, and why everybody says, well, this is finally it. I'm thinking, well, it's been finally it over and over and over and over and over again. And so I'm not interested in it as this is finally it. I'm more interested in it as what is it being used for this time, and how is it being used, and how is it being used now that there's social networks, there's the internet, there's email. Back when this stuff happened to Bennewitz, none of that existed. So they actually had to, you know, that's why they needed people out in the field talking to people and looking at mail and opening people's mail and all that other stuff. They needed to know what they were doing, who they were talking to, what their relationships were, what the belief systems were. And that's very easy now. You just go on social media and find out. In fact, I see people doing this on social media, and it makes me kind of wonder. They will put something up that's like a statement. What do you think of this? And it's designed to make people react emotionally. And so everybody says, I think this, it's like when a radio station or something says, what was your worst date? You know, everybody's going to react. So if somebody says, you know, what's the worst UFO video you've ever seen? Oh, everybody's going to react. And so, you know, you can start to make little maps of who knows whose opinions are what, all that. And, you know, of course that's slightly paranoid. I know it is. But it's also been used in the past, and it's a very easy tool to use when you want to map out like who knows who, because before they had to do this kind of brute force just by talking to people. Now all you have to do is look at electronic, relationships and signals going back and forth. So I could ramble for the next hour, but I won't.
You have every reason to feel that way. You met these people personally, and you wrote a book, and you formed relationships with. It sounds like everybody in the book you were able to make a connection with. So I could totally understand where you're coming from. And somebody just said, book purchased. He won me over. So here we go. You got another. All
Thank
right,
you.
guys.
Government's basically
stream here. Here we go.
Governments spin everything anyway. It doesn't matter what the message is, whether it's UFOs or other things, don't they?
I don't know what's going on. I'm so sorry.
Governments spin messages for the economy, for defence, for social programs. You always have to look beyond what they're saying to try and work out, where they're coming from. What are they trying to push? What's the hidden agenda? So ufology should be no different. And I can't see why people don't see that. And that's what you mentioned in the book about things being black and white. They're not. There are shades of grey, aren't there? So the other thing is really, because this is a rabbit hole that effectively Paul Bennewitz went into. He descended into it. How much did you find yourself going down that same rabbit hole when you were writing the book and researching the book?
I tried not to. What I tried to do when I was doing the book is get as many sources as possible and as many open source and outside the loop sources that I could. Like if Richard Doty told me something, of course I'd take it with a huge grain of salt. Sometimes I'd include it, but I'd also say in the book, the only source for this was Richard Doty. At least I tried to do that. I think I did. But then I'd also see, like he'd say, oh, well, Paul was seeing these pictures on his screen, but that was the NSA beaming that into his house from across the street. It's like, okay, that could be. But then I hear from Gabe Valdez, he went to his house and saw these things on his screen. So it actually was happening. Now, I don't know if they came from where Doty said they were coming from, but I'm going to assume that they did, because where else would these signals be coming from? So that was just one example. But, I just tried, because I tried to see if I could triangulate inside and outside sources. And if they matched up, I would include them in the narrative. And if they didn't, I would either qualify it very heavily or I threw it out. There's probably, 75% of the stuff that I looked into, I didn't include because I couldn't verify it. I couldn't verify the facts of the case because I don't have access to those people. So, as much as I could to make the story hold together, and from the Bennewitz and public facing point of view, I tried to make a story that made sense, held together, and showed what was going on at the time, what the motivations were, and how people can be led astray very quickly if they just believe what they want to believe. If you tell somebody something they already believe or they're emotionally attached to, they're going to believe you a lot quicker than if you tell them something that's not in their worldview or they don't like or whatever. And then you can hang all kinds of other BS on top of whatever that thing is that they like. And the crazier and the more out there the person is, and in their belief system, the more outlandish things you can hang on there and have them believe that narrative. And that, that's dangerous. And I see this in UFO and paranormal, especially UFO stuff, a lot. Somebody says, "Hey, I'm an insider. Hey, you're doing good work, and here's a little secret." And this still goes on. It still goes on now. Serpo was another thing that was a whole, fiasco with somebody saying, "Hey, you're doing a good job. Here's some information. Put it out there." And it had nothing to do with UFOs. It probably had to do with, some kind of weapon system that was being developed at the time. But if you believe what you want to believe, you're going to be led astray very quickly. You have to weigh evidence and not have a belief, especially with the UFO thing, because there's no, you don't have a way to verify a lot of this information. That you can't reproduce a UFO on demand. So it's a really good Rorschach blot for the ufology tarot thing. The first thing I said in the video was the UFO is a Rorschach blot, because it really is. It can you can hang any story you want on it and have people, almost anybody that's into the subject, believe what you want to believe. So which is why I'm kind of viciously agnostic about it. I can also believe 4 or 5 things at once. I entertain 4 or 5 ideas or 10 at once, and don't, from the most outlandish to the most skeptical. I have those running around in my head all the time, and it's It's a little difficult. It sounds like you're fence sitting, but it's the only sane thing I can think to do and still keep my antenna up.
Sounds healthy.
Yeah, absolutely.
You could have a completely stupid, message, but there's a grain of something very valuable in that.
You write that in the book. You say there was like this letter had one gem of truth in it, or something to that effect. So it's hard, it's hard to not be like that, and I think that's a healthy way to be, as Graham said.
Yeah. I can't remember the letter that you're referring to. But with regards to intelligence stuff, that's the other thing. I listened to everything that these intelligence people told me, wrote it all down. They wouldn't let me record anything. So after the interview, I just sat down with a piece of paper and just furiously wrote down in a notebook everything they told me, so I'd remember it. And a lot of these things you wouldn't find out if they were true. A lot of them I didn't find out till later whether they were true or false after the book was published. But you have to hold on to all this information, and days, weeks, months, years later, you may find out that what they were telling you was true, false, part of another story, whatever it is. Another weird thing that happened, and I will stop again and let you guys ask more questions, which I found very interesting, was these intelligence people, they would tell me a story with no context. I'd have no idea what they were talking about. Like, we did so-and-so in Afghanistan this year and the operation involved this. When you meet so-and-so, tell them that. I'm like, okay. So I go to the next person. And if you weren't on time, they wouldn't talk to you. That's another thing. You had to be absolutely 100% to the second on time to meet them. So I got there early every time. And I know they did. They were probably watching me. I have no idea. But we would sit down and I'd say, so-and-so told me to tell you this. And I would give them that story and they'd go, oh, that's what that was. Because they weren't privy to that information at the time. So basically I was giving a piece of a puzzle that they were not cleared to know. But it's, 20, 30 years later. So it's okay for them to know as long as they don't break their oath and tell each other. So they would tell me, a third party, a cutout that knew nothing about what was going on, but it would provide them some context for something they always wanted to know that they were left out of the loop on. And in that way, what I was doing was taking a present to that next person so that they would be more apt to talk to me and be at their ease and tell me what I needed to know as much as they could. And I noticed this more than once. So, you find out some of the stuff you hear in spy movies and all that is true. And what intelligence people, their currency is information. That's the most valuable thing they can possibly have. And if you can give them a piece of information that's valuable to them, they immediately open up to you. And it just made me it made me feel weird and sort of what's the word? Not special, but just kind of like, okay, I'm doing something here that makes a difference, at least in these people's lives, and it's helping my book. So that's just a weird little story. I've talked about it before, but it was just something I found out while I was working on the book. It made me more fascinated with the intelligence community. I'm a huge intelligence and spy fanatic now. I think one of the best spy movies, what was it? What was the Chuck Barris one with George Clooney directed? Confessions of a Dangerous Mind. That's one of the best spy movies I've ever seen. It's like I'm watching it and go, oh my God, that's stuff I was told about. So whoever was messing with Chuck Barris knew what they were doing, or he talked to the right people or whatever.
Greg, I have a question, and it's with regards to the early stages of the book, where it seemed that Rick Doty wasn't as forthcoming with interviews as he may sort of be nowadays. Was there a stage where you thought that it might take a while and maybe even not get an interview with him, and you'd have to kind of get the information from third parties to kind of get the story out?
No, because Bill told me he would put in a good word for me and say that I was okay to talk to, and I was. Now Doty hates me, won't talk to me anymore, but at the time he was very nice, and we had one meeting, and it was like 3 hours at a Denny's, and every time I met with these people, they would sit in the corner seat facing the door, so they could face the door and be in the corner, so they could see everything in the restaurant. It was Every single one of them did the same thing. But yeah, we sat in that corner seat. He talked to me for 3 hours, and I said, "Can I record it?" He said, "Nope." So I had to drive back to Albuquerque from Grants, New Mexico, where he was at the time, out about an hour drive. And the whole time I'm just going over and over and over in my mind. What did we say? What did we say? What did we say? And as soon as I got to the hotel, I sat down and just pounded all out on my computer just to get it, get it all down. I got like 5 or 6 single space pages out of everything we said. And of course, I think 4 sentences of that 5 pages or maybe a paragraph was usable. The rest of it was just kind of unusable BS. But that's fine. People say, why would you talk to Richard Doty? He lies all the time. It's because every once in a while, he's going to tell you something that actually can be verified and makes sense. And, or is very close to, or gives you a hint. You just have to listen carefully, and you have to be able to retain all this. And then when somebody says the same thing, that little key in your mind goes, yeah, that thing. And you've been able to verify it.
I've got a quick question. It's not necessarily a quick question, but I've got a question along those lines. On page 81, Doty kind of takes credit for kind of unearthing, rebirthing the Aztec, New Mexico crash, right? And, as you put it in there, Frank Scully in 1955 was the first person to kind of really talk about that case. And it was widely understood to be a hoax. Doty kind of was proud, seemingly, of putting that back into the ether and back into the conversation. And of course, it fell out of favor yet again after that. And then in recent years, in the last couple of years, it's come back again because Jacques Vallée and Paola Harris wrote about it. So with a situation like that, like in the Hall of Mirrors, where are you at with cases like Aztec at this point? After all of that back and forth?
I'm not sure where I am at with Aztec. I think that things that happen in history can be conflated because of time and location. And a lot of stuff was going on in New Mexico in the 40s. Testing of things, V2 rockets, the paperclip scientists were there. The mogul balloons were being sent up, all these things, and that things that happened during that time can easily be ported between different stories. As for Aztec, I'm not sure. I did go there once. I went there after I read William Steinman's book when I was like 22 years old. I flew out there by myself, rented a car, and drove all the way to Aztec and drove to the spot that he said that the thing had crashed. And what I found was something like a concrete, somebody had poured a concrete foundation that was about 10 by 10 feet with some rebar sticking out of it or something. Not much else. Although while I was there, I don't know how much stock you put in Aztec, and I will continue with answering the question, but I looked from the top of this mesa that I was on, or cliff, and at the bottom where the road was, because the road curved around and came up to the top of this cliff, I looked down on the road. There was a white truck sitting there just with somebody in it looking at me. And I'm out in the middle of nowhere and there's nobody else around. And I'm just thinking, who is that? Why do they not move? So I got nervous and got in the car and started driving away. And as I drove down the road, 2 white trucks pulled in behind me and chased me. I started going faster and faster. I was going 70 miles an hour down this gravel road. I went so fast that all the dirt and gravel, I couldn't see the trucks behind me. I was so scared. I was like 21, 22, and I've got these 2 guys in dress shirts and sunglasses in white trucks chasing me. And so finally I said, okay, I'm in the middle of nowhere. They can kill me if they want to. I'm just going to stop and see what they want. So I slowed down and stopped, and the trucks weren't there anymore. They had turned away somewhere. But that was a weird thing that happened to me when I went out to Aztec. I don't know who they were. They might have been, El Paso Gas Company people wondering what I was doing out there. I have no idea because they have all these gas lines out there. But that was a really weird and strange thing that happened there, and it stays with me. As for, all these crashed vehicle stories, I think some of them were military. I also think some of them maybe were not. But I also think that pieces people find, and this is a weird thing, and I've said this recently, I don't think those are pieces of something I don't think they're the pieces of something that crashed. I think they're representations or avatars of things that crashed. And I know that's a weird thing to say, but I think that's why they can't be figured out, because they just don't exist as normal material. And I don't know how to explain that. I don't know how to be logical about it, but that is my intuition about it.
I had a question along the lines of the weird. So in chapter 18, I was surprised to come across anecdotes about orbs. That's something I didn't think I would read in this story. So, because I just didn't know they were associated with.
Oh, in his
Bennewitz.
house.
Yeah. So, I mean, what's your take on the orbs? And I know Doty mentioned that he had seen them in the house as well.
Doty, I think, may have. Bill Moore told me he saw them.
Mm-hmm.
And people always tell me, it's like, well, Bill Moore is a liar. He lies to people. It's like, he has never lied to me. Not that I can tell. He's told me stuff, and years later I find out that it's true. But what he said, and also he's a friend of mine. We're really good friends. We're still friends. I see him once or twice a year. But what he told me was that he went to Paul's house and he looked up at the ceiling, and there were these little things that were about softball or grapefruit sized peach colored lights. They just looked like globes. He said they were floating on his ceiling, like where the ceiling meets the wall. And he said, he's like, Paul, what's that? And Paul said, oh yeah, those are here all the time. Like it wasn't any big deal to him. And he said, if you got on a ladder and got up and tried to do something like touch them, he said they would turn off. But they wouldn't blink out. He said it would be like you turn off an incandescent light where it kind of fades out really fast. But he said they looked three-dimensional. They weren't like a light shining on it was almost like a, he didn't say this, but what sounded to be like is if you had a soap bubble filled with smoke and you were shining a light at it. He did not know what those things were. There may have been some technology where you can beam a holographic image in. I don't know. There is now, if you look online, holographic images can be projected onto dust and moisture particles in the air by using, I think they have a way to direct those things into like a certain area, and then you shine a laser or a light at it, and it'll project an image. It's very small, but if they can do that on a small scale, it probably means it's been able to be done on a larger scale for quite a while now. That's just how this technology seems to work. It just, like the adaptive optics that I describe in the book that's used in astronomy now. That was developed for spy technology in the late 70s. And in the early 90s, suddenly it was just given to the astronomy community to be able to focus telescopes by changing the reflective surface of a mirror to adapt to the changes in the atmosphere, air currents and stuff. But they did this for spy technology to track satellites. And so I think what Bennewitz was experiencing in a lot of cases was just high-tech spy technology that was being tested on him or used on him or just almost as a, to see if the stuff would work. And a lot of it was probably developed at Kirtland anyway. So it was easy to just kind of port it out to where he was and see how it worked. And if they were across the street, maybe they were using the technology there. I don't know.
So apart from actually just trying to misinform him and misdirect him, they're maybe using him as a guinea pig as well for things they were developing in that kind of respect.
Yeah, possibly.
Well, I'm curious. I mean, did you look into the legality of any of what they did? I mean, it sounded like they were constantly in his house. They had his phones tapped. They were intercepting his mail. I mean, has no one ever filed a suit against the government or an agency about their involvement?
No, they
haven't.
With them? They haven't. They should. I've had this, the last few times I talk about the book, which was a while ago, I write up at the front, and I think one of you were saying, I tried to be very, journalistic in the way I did it. I did not pass judgment in the book on what was done. I figure if you're reading the book and you see what's going on, you will have your own moral ideas about what was going on, and you're probably right. And I agree with you. It was wrong. It was probably illegal, though not all of it. And that I don't think there's been a prosecution because his family just didn't want to they don't want to rock the boat. It was difficult for them. In fact, in the book somewhere, I said, don't bother the family. They don't want to talk to you. His son kicked me out of the office when I asked if I could talk to him about the book. He told me to leave immediately. I felt really bad too. I felt like, oh my God, I'm invading these people's privacy. But I think that some of it was covered by, law where you can, if it has to do with national security, you can, surreptitiously look at, and whatever at people's private lives and phone calls and all that. If you think they're communicating with people, with enemy adversaries. And then some of it was probably a bit rogue and illegal. And some of that by Doty, because I think Doty got in trouble for that later, actually, when he got drummed out of his position as in AFOSI for, I think he messed up some kind of Operation Eastern Europe. But that at least that's what I remember. But anyway, I also had my friend Walter Bosley, who was in AFOSI about 10 years after Doty. And I said, did you know Doty? He said, no, I didn't, but I knew about him. And I said, how? And he said, because he was used as an example of what not to do. He had just really overstepped what he was supposed to do, because people in OSI are actually given apparently a lot of leeway as long as they stay within the law and stay within the mission statement about what they can do. But Rick went a little bit further, and I think he likes messing with people. That's why he's good at what he does. He's basically a kind of a really good troll. And as an intelligence asset, that's sometimes really what you want, unfortunately.
Yeah, guys, just chime in as you have openings if you have questions.
Oh, okay. I haven't been looking.
Or also, if there's there's also things, I mean, if there's something that you want to address, Greg, as well, that you haven't talked about, or something about the book you think people should know, that's also important. Because the process of writing these seems like it's just such an undertaking, especially with your type of research where you were boots on ground, as they say, not just, sitting, you were interviewing these people. And my question is, how much of that activity, because there was other paranormal activity reported in that area, right? Near Kirtland.
UFO activity, yeah.
Yeah, so other people were seeing stuff. Do you think it was all secret tech, or do you think that any of it was actually unexplainable by our standards?
The stuff Bennewitz was involved with was probably mostly secret technology, and the stuff that was truly anomalous, that was UFO stuff, I don't really think entered into the story, really. I just included it because there are these reports that were released, which I suppose are true, about some UFO sightings over Kirtland Air Force Base. I think they've actually been verified. I think Bruce Maccabee actually looked into it and found some triangulation of those. So there were anomalous things happening at the Air Force Base. I think anomalous things happen at most military bases because, one, there's a lot of stuff going on there. Two, and much more important, there's always people there looking 24 hours a day, which you don't have in most places. I think the only reason Bennewitz saw what he did is because he was up at 2 a.m. in the middle of the winter, freezing his butt off, when they expected most people were going to be in bed. So, yeah, for the purposes of the book, I just included those to show that, this stuff does hang around. It does exist. It does happen around military bases, and it does affect how people at the base react to things. But it also shows that they could use, as I said, the subject to obfuscate and misdirect attention and find out who knew who and all this. And yeah, the boots on the ground thing, I guess that's just good old fashioned doing journalism. I went to journalism school, but I stopped, and my degree was in art history, very, very useful degree. And so I had some training in it, but the thing that really helped me is, and I've got this deep-seated belief that I can talk to anybody about anything and get people at their ease pretty easily. Of course, I needed those introductions. Of course, I needed somebody saying this person is, he's not messing around. But I was able to talk to all these people and get some good information and also some personal insight out of some of them. And that was valuable to me. I mean, the fact that Bennewitz didn't really have any friends and he really was into his work, and that the only thing he really did besides his work was read Wild West novels and fly an airplane. And actually, he was an aerobatic pilot, and that really intrigues me because I have a pilot's license too. So I felt like this kind of kinship with Bennewitz. So it's just, it was more interesting to me to find out about these personal stories and how they affected people emotionally, and how it changed their lives, and how this subject, it just brings all kinds of different people together around certain things. I mean, the cattle mutilation thing pops up in the book too, because Gabe Valdez, who Bennewitz talked to quite a bit, was friends with, he was the first person to start actually looking at cattle mutilation cases in Dulce and around northern New Mexico, because that was his beat at the time. And he showed me a lot of his background, a lot of his information, a lot of his photos, and talked to me quite a bit about that too. That's a whole nother book. Actually, his son Greg Valdez wrote a book about it, about his father's files that he went through after his father passed away.
That
It
makes
seems
it
that,
interesting. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Vinny.
I was just going to ask quickly. It seemed that Bennewitz was so entrenched in the subject that after meeting Myrna Hansen, that he had formulated and solidified his beliefs even without Doty's influence, and it almost seemed that he couldn't be kind of swayed either way.
I thought he had too, and I still believe that. I think Chris Lambright disagrees with me. He wrote X Descending, which is another book you might want to read, and he'll give you a different version. But as far as I know, and also from somebody like Gabe Valdez, he told me the same thing. He said Paul really had, as far as I remember, he told me this. Paul really had these ideas pretty much set in his head before Myrna showed up, and that just kind of ramped everything up. And whatever she saw, whatever she was dealing with, just kind of added to his paranoia and his ideas about what was going on. And I think they actually affected each other, since they were in such close proximity and very intimately connected in how they were dealing with what happened to her. He was doing the regressions with her, first with Leo Sprinkle and then with James Harder, and it got weirder and weirder and weirder until they would only do the hypnosis sessions in a car covered with barbecue foil to block out aliens' rays, control rays. And who knows? Maybe he was right, but it just got stranger and stranger very quickly, it seems.
Yeah, it seems like the whole Dolce underground base thing revolved around these beings being focused on Myrna's experience in particular. Like they had just decided all of this stuff without any influence from Doty and AFOSI and all of the externals from.
Yeah, I think Chris thinks that there was an influence from AFOSI beforehand that changed his mind and drove him down that road, that it had started much earlier. I wasn't not able to find that.
Right.
I just mentioned this because Chris told me this and we discussed it a bit. But I think that existed before Doty got involved, and they just capitalized on it. And the Dulce thing, I think, even came after that, because Myrna didn't say anything about Dulce. She just said something about an underground facility, and she apparently said that described some place in Manzano, the underground nuclear storage facility, that really surprised. Doty said surprised him. Now you take that with a grain of salt, but I think I did mention it in the book. I talked to somebody recently that worked there in the last 6 months, and he said that there was a presidential bunker there that had the presidential seal on the floor. So it was just a place that if the president happened to be there, they could land there and quickly go underground there in case of a nuclear attack.
And then I was just at a conference over the weekend, a small one, and somebody was talking about that too. But you can go take tours of it now, apparently, because like the cover was blown, and now people are they can't hide it because it was in like prime real estate and it was hidden from the public, and people were so upset about it that they had to make it public. knowledge. And
I guess so. It's in the middle of a military base. I don't know.
oh, okay, this might have been a different one then. Yeah.
Might have been, yeah. This
yeah.
is Manzano Mountain
Oh, okay, yeah.
storage complex at Kirtland Air Force Base. Actually, if you look at a satellite picture of it, I may actually still be able to do this. You can see all the little entrances going in, the roads going around, and these bunkers, concrete like doorways. Actually, if you're off the base, I've actually taken pictures of it. If you have enough of a telephoto lens, you can actually see the doorways and the little garage door things and a light over them.
Wow. Yeah, this is something different. I'm sorry. Yeah. I have a question. What are your thoughts now about the whole hypnosis and regression that she went through, that Myrna went through? Because a lot of people that are experiencers are told like, oh, you should do a regression, or, people use it as evidence, but it seems like it's very hard to have somebody do the regression that doesn't lead them on. What are your thoughts on regression after writing this book?
They're the same as before. And I think it's just like you said, it's an inaccurate way to get information. I think probably the best information is stuff that comes up consciously, or is directed by somebody that has no interest in the UFO subject whatsoever and is not skeptical or hostile to it, which is kind of hard to find still. But I think hypnosis can be used, but not by UFO researchers. I think that's it, because it has nothing to do so much with the leading, which I'm sure happens, and I've seen it happen. It has more to do with, you go to a UFO researcher, what do you think you expect is going to happen when you have somebody regressing you who regresses UFO witnesses? Well, of course, that's what's going to come out. So it's, for hypnotically recalled memories, I'm a little less sure about than something that just somebody says, look, this just spontaneously, I just remember this. And I think I would trust those more, even though people can confabulate on their own and all that. It's a very hard nut to crack. Yes, there is something that's not us. Yes, it does contact us once in a while. But no, I don't think anybody has a real good handle on what it is, except the experiencers themselves. However messy that recall is, or however weird they want to be about it, I would trust an experiencer's recall more than I would trust an experiencer's hypnotically recalled recall. That's just how I feel about it right now.
That makes perfect sense. I was wondering, Doty has been popping up again lately. He's been showing up at some UK conventions as of late. He's shown up on some Gaia TV programs recently, and he's even joined Twitter. And he was on a space last night, just answering random questions from folks on Twitter for hours. What do you think about that? Is it old habits die hard? Is he bored and he loves the community? What do you feel like is going on there, or how do you look at that these days? And I have a kind of loosely related question. If he's kind of up to some of his old tricks, are there other people that you've discovered through your research in the intervening years between now and then, that are kind of the undetected Dotys or the undetected Bill Moores, that are maybe underknown?
Yeah. Doty, for his part, I think he just likes it. He likes attention. He's retired now, so he has time to do this. I noticed after he retired from the New Mexico State Police, he started appearing a lot of these things because he likes it. He likes the attention. He likes people talk to him. He likes the notoriety. And I don't think it's harmful. I don't think it's dangerous. I don't think anything like that. What I think is harmful or dangerous is people start taking him absolutely seriously and following everything he says down every rabbit hole, because I don't even think he's aware all the time of what the stories that he's spinning. And yeah, if he ever hears this, he's going to get all mad at me again, but that's okay because he won't talk to me anymore. I don't have any ill will towards him. I just think he's that kind of character, and you have to treat him as that kind of character. As at this point, kind of like a fun, sideshow to the UFO thing. Interesting, but to me personally, not valuable. I mean, I'm glad he's still around. It's kind of funny to me that he is, but I mean, I wouldn't I wouldn't, count on anything he says as gospel truth.
Yes,
Did I answer all the
absolutely.
question?
Oh, just if you feel like if you've run into any kind of underknown
others.
Bill Moores or Doties out there.
I'm not sure. I think anybody that says they're from the government and announces some inside information is potentially that kind of person. Because I think on the one hand, a lot of them have an absolutely sincere interest in the subject. Totally sincere interest. They want to know what's going on. That's what John Alexander and Hal Puthoff and all those people that were in the aviary were after during the Bennewitz period. They really wanted to know what was behind the UFO thing. And I think they thought their status, their insider status and their clearances could get them that. Ultimately, I don't think it did. But I think that still exists, and the subject is still being used, as I said earlier, for intelligence and defense purposes. And that anybody coming from the government saying anything like that, I will listen to them carefully, but I will not believe 100% of what they say. But I will listen to everything, because within those stories, there's something usable or interesting that may be completely not related to the UFO thing, or at least obliquely related to it in a way that might be important to me and my understanding. So I'm not like, don't listen to these people. They're lying. I'm just more like, you know what? They exist. It's part of the show. If you think it's a useful part of the show to you, then deal with it. Then use it. Then, record this stuff. But don't think it's the best revelation ever and this is finally it and all that, because that's like The Boy Who Cried Wolf. It's just going to over and over and over again, the same thing. But the show is a little different each time. And to me, that's kind of fascinating. It evolves with the way people are.
That's the idea about people who are saying, don't speak to Doty, he always lies, as I said before. But Vinny and I have seen him twice this year in the UK. I stood in line for coffee with him for about 20 minutes one morning. And it wasn't a case of me wanting to ask him questions about this, because as you say, you're not necessarily going to get the truth. You're going to get a version of the truth. But it's just interesting to size these kind of people up, to see how they look, how they interact with people on a normal basis, to see what kind of person they are. Just to have 5 minutes looking at them and just watching them as a normal human being, rather than all this other stuff, because that gives you a little bit of an insight into the person as well, rather than asking them a series of questions. Just by watching how they conduct themselves.
Yes. Yeah, that's why I will talk to any of these people. It's fine by me, because it's an interesting thing to me. I talked to Lou Elizondo a little bit, because I really wanted to know what he thought and what he was going to say and how he interacted with me, and we had a great time. I don't believe everything he says, but he knew that, and we both knew we were playing a silly game, and that, to me, that's interesting. I haven't talked to him in years now, but at the time I talked to him a little bit at one of the conferences, at the UAP conference in Huntsville.
I think your book does a great job of this, and you reiterated the point this evening of kind of keeping these things in balance. And I think it's important for everyone to remember that there's not an agenda, there are agendas. I mean, the very fact that you point out in the book, there are multiple three-letter agencies that are interacting at any given time with Paul Bennewitz. And I think I can't recall a situation where you weren't saying the NSA, wasn't present in the room for a meeting of some sort or another. We don't know who those people are. We just know they were there. And we like to think, at least in America after 9/11, there's this better coordination. We're all on the same team. We're all kind of doing the same thing. But that is definitely not the case, that these agencies have their own agendas. They have their own secrets. They enjoy that kind of power over the secrets that they have. And they don't give those out very freely. So there's a lot of things going on in this topic. So I think your message is really important, that we digest as much as we can and listen as much as we can to then see what kind of cream rises to the top here, if any at all. But if you had to, I know you're maybe hesitant to do it, but if you had to speculate as to something that you feel, strongly about is really going on, what would you say it is?
In regards to the government and the UFO issue?
Yeah, maybe let's start with just the UFO issue, period.
I'm as certain as I can be that there is some other intelligence besides us, and it interacts with us occasionally. Now, what form that takes, I know it probably takes myriad forms. And my biggest question, and I've said this on shows, is my question is not what are UFOs, where do they come from, whatever that, what happens. My biggest question is what causes UFO reports. Because if you ask that question, you start getting into ideas of perception and the neurology of the human nervous system, memory, storytelling, trauma, all these things. I think these are really important things in the mix, because the most important thing, I think, is the witness interaction with whatever it is. And if we can concentrate on that rather than the government stuff or the new agey stuff, or whatever you want to call it, everything around that gathers around the UFO issue, I think the witness interacting with the phenomenon is the most important thing. And if we can concentrate on that, and we can talk to these witnesses and let them say what they want to say rather than what we want them to say, that will begin to crack the enigma a little bit. And I think that understanding is going to come from an understanding of us, not of whatever that external whatever that external thing is, what causes UFO reports? I think that's the most important question we can ask right now.
That is a great question. And unfortunately, Graham has to go. So thank you so much for Graham.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Greg.
Graham.
It's been
Thanks.
really interesting listening to how you were describing the book and your research. I thoroughly enjoyed that. Thank you very much.
I enjoyed your questions. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye,
Have a good
everyone.
one,
Graham.
Graham.
See you
Good seeing
later.
you.
Bye
See
bye.
you, buddy. See you soon.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, Jay kind of asked this already, but through this whole process with like the New York Times coming out with a big article, until now, what has been like the biggest, is there any big red flags, like things that kind of made you say, like, it just doesn't feel right?
Well, the whole thing of the government saying we're going to tell you about UFOs, that just didn't make me feel right. Because the agenda behind that is so complicated that you can't really get a good read on it. It's just kind of like there's a bunch of people somewhere that figure it's important to talk about this right now for some strange reason. I think that the people that were involved, the naval flyers, the pilots, I think they did see something. I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's unidentified, flying objects or UAP or whatever you want to call it, or it's some technology we don't know about that was being tested on them, where the commanders knew what was going on, but nobody else did, or some combination. I don't know. I mean, the fact that there was a swarm of them, they said on the radar, that sounds like drones to me, but it also sounds like swarms of UFOs as well. So, I think when this information comes out, it just counts on the ambiguous nature of the phenomenon to let people, graft whatever meaning they want onto it, or have the meaning grafted onto it for them.
Right.
And I think that's part of what's been happening too. I don't know what's going on, but I'm pretty sure has to do, like I said, with defense and intelligence and technology, and all those things together, and that we're never going to know what that was. If it's successful or if it's not, it's just gonna the furor will die away. It's already dying away now, I think. Unfortunately, Congress and everything got involved in all that, but I think, and I predicted this at the beginning, what you're going to see is all this excitement, and then over the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, it's just going to go back to nothing again, and people will be on to other things. And I'm kind of waiting for that. I would rather people don't pay attention to the UFO subject, because people get all excited, and they bring all their hopes and their wants and their backgrounds and all that. And it to me, it just it kind of confuses the field to me. And then when all this falls away, the people that were there before, that are still working at this and still working really hard and still trying to figure out what's going on, will still be there. and it'll be nice and quiet, and we can go back to the work of doing what we want to do, which is studying this thing and maybe figuring out what it might be, or at least I think the first understanding is going to come, as I said, from how we see it, not what it is. And if we can understand that, that will be part of the answer.
Yeah.
And once everything quiets down and the government's out of it and all that, we can go back to that. And it's been bubbling up. In fact, the good thing about all this is it got a whole bunch of people who are serious and have degrees and have backing and have, the wherewithal and the interest to look at it, like Gary Nolan and like, Jeff Kripal down at Rice University. All these people, Mike Masters, the guy from Wyoming, all these people are now interested in it in a way that they weren't, because it was made safe for them to be interested. That's another thing I think happened and was done intentionally, is somebody somewhere wanted serious people to look at this. And that fallout is I think that's the most wonderful fallout of all from all of this. And those people will stay interested. And that excites me. I mean, the most interesting conversations I've had are with academics right now. So those are the people, when I go to these conventions, I seek them out. I sought out Mike Masters and kept bugging him until we finally went to a football game together and we talked for a while about this. And it's much more valuable to me to talk to these people about this than it is to talk to, a UFO researcher or, Corey Good or whatever. I really want to talk to people that are coming to this from outside of the field and being serious and being circumspect about it and not jumping to conclusions. That's amazing. And the private conversations you have with these people, you're like, wow, you're a real weirdo. This is great. I would not have expected you to, a lot of cases. And so it's been a real eye-opening experience. And so, yeah, I mean, I thank the New York Times and Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal for doing that article, because the fallout has been, a lot of it has been wonderful. I wouldn't have met Jay without the article.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I wouldn't have met any of these people because I was afraid to talk about it because I didn't want people to think I was like super crazy, But after meeting everybody, it's brought so many people around into the community, and people that have been wanting to talk about the subject for so long can now talk about it without, some people are still not on board, but more and more people are going to listen to them and not treat them like a crazy outsider. I think that the community has been more of a blessing to me than anything. And it's even encouraged me to finish my science degree, because I'm like, I can't do anything without my science degree, because I started it and had kids, was like, oh, pause. And then, but it's really encouraged me because I'm like, I can't do anything without science. And that's after hearing Gary Nolan speak at your conference, Jay. And also after talking to Jeff and Diana, I'm like, yeah, like it's motivating me in a positive direction. And maybe that's kind of what we have to focus on. And it brings it back to what you said, the people, right? We have to focus on the people.
Yeah, we really do have to focus on the people that are interacting with this, because I think that's our closest connection to whatever's going on. And it comes with a lot of baggage and it comes with a lot of noise, but it also comes with a lot of insight. And you have to, just like the intelligence stuff, you have to be open to it all, even the stuff that you think is weird or woo-woo or whatever it is. So some people are like, Greg, you're so logical about this. And then you start, talking about channeling and stuff. What's wrong with you? I said, there's signal in a lot of this stuff. You have to be open to that signal. That signal can come from anywhere. And it's not going to be a coherent signal either. And it's not going to be a signal that's for everybody. It's going to be for each individual. And that's the toughest one. I think the example I give is, you go to a UFO convention and you see two people that have never met each other before, who have had completely different experiences, but they both know they're talking about the same thing. That to me is like, that is a real signal in the noise. It's like they both know something extremely strange and life-changing has happened to them, and that most people don't understand. I've been actually championing this guy, Finn Handley, who I think may be listening. He's in England. He's been taking witness descriptions and making videos with computer animation of what they described. The closest you can possibly get to having a UFO experience. And I think if more people see these things and see what happened to people and say, look, this is not made up stuff. This is from the witness going back and forth with the artist and creating these things. And he doesn't put music on them. He doesn't put narration. All he puts on it is a sound effect. So you're basically sitting in the same space as that person, experience as much as you can what they experience. We're even trying to get, he is even trying to get to the point, and he did it in this last video, where he shuts all the sound out, the Oz effect sound. Like some guy's watching this thing, you hear wind and suddenly it goes zoop, and there's no more wind, because that's what the guy said he experienced. And as the thing flies off over the hill, the wind fades back in. You can hear the high wind again. In case it happened.
That's powerful. That's powerful for an experiencer. Like I shared my experience with a gentleman that did a similar thing. Probably not. I mean, and just seeing it come to life after all the years. And I've even had a friend's mom drew it for me after I told her about it, you know, and it's things like that that mean a lot to us, you know. And I don't, you know, I'm not somebody that's like, listen to my story every 2 minutes, but I have experienced the unknown. And to me, it really gives me comfort to know that people are doing the work, like all of you here, like you, Greg, especially writing your book, doing all that work. Graham wrote amazing books too. Jay with the Experiencer Group, Nathan, just everything you do, Vinny, like you're all just so amazing. And it, no matter what happens with the government, they cannot tear apart the relationships that are being built right now. But I have a question. I know that we're coming on the hour and I don't want to keep anybody too long. Do you have time for a few audience questions?
Yeah, I'm fine. Today's open.
Okay. And then also after that, I want to ask you, you know, what your plans are for the future and all that, you know. So we have a question about another controversial character. Deb is an amazing person, by the way. She says, do you talk about Linda Moulton Howe part and why she was given fake docs? Do you know anything about that?
I did describe that in there. I did describe when she came to the base and Dodie sat her down in a chair and there were people looking from one-way glass on the other side to see her reaction. And they showed her a bunch of documents. I think most of them were fake. Some of them weren't. But at the time, I talked to a couple people that she met with a day or two after that, and they said she was very excited, thought she'd been let in on something very important, and you know, for her part, she kind of was. But I think they were trying to get her attention because Dodie said that she had made that documentary on cattle mutilations and that it was very accurate and it had scared some people or whatever. Of course, he's going to say that. She's a journalist.
Right.
But I think that what they thought was that she could be used as an asset to spread different types of information. I don't know if that ever happened. I think she's smart enough to know if she was getting disinformation, especially, you know, in the years after that, and that you know, it was just another like kind of reach out to the community to see if they could have a witting or unwitting asset available. You know, there are a lot of things going on with Bennewitz. I mean, they weren't just trying to figure out what he was looking at. They were trying to figure out who he knew, who he was talking to, who was paying attention to him, who was writing to him. You know, if he got a letter from Russia, they'd have to see where that person was coming from, or who, you know, if they really were a Russian UFO researcher, just stuff like that. And Dodie and a couple other people told me, and I wouldn't doubt it, that a couple of spy networks were kind of taken down because of Bennewitz, because they found out who was talking to whom, because of the assets they had in Russia. And some of them they had American assets in Russia, and Russia had ones here. And they each tried to find out who was doing what. And if there was danger of having them uncovered, they had to find out who those people were and who was trying to uncover it. So Bill told me this once. He said, imagine the Bennewitz operation as a giant stage play that lasts for 24 hours. And he said the producer is Falcon, and the director was Richard Helms, who was the head of the CIA at the time. But what happened with Bennewitz was one scene for 2 minutes in this giant play. And him and Dodie were just little bit players in one scene for 2 minutes in a 24-hour long play. That's what people have to realize, because people think that there was this giant operation to misinform the UFO community and send Bennewitz off on a tangent and infiltrate the UFO community, all that. No, it was one cog in a huge machine. And that's all I'm describing in the book. But that one cog took up a 250-page book. So there's a whole bunch of other cogs you don't know about, and we never will know about. And that's kind of how I think about what's going on now with the disclosure stuff. It's a tiny little cog at a huge wheel, at a huge machine that we will never know about, whether it succeeds or not.
Yes, that's scary to think about, because Bennewitz was a pretty intense, 2 minutes. So to think that there's more minutes like that happening in the play, but that's a great analogy. And
Yeah.
Gerald wants to know what you think about Skinwalker.
What Paul does? It says, what does Paul?
I know. I don't
Does
think
he
he
mean
meant
me?
Paul. I think so. Do you mean? Yeah, I don't know. Or
What did Paul Bennewitz say? I don't think
Yeah, I don't
Skinwalker
know
actually
that.
happened
Yeah.
at that point. I think it was still owned by
Yeah.
the Shermans or whoever originally owned the
Hmm.
ranch. What I think about it, if it's me, is that as far as I can tell, and from the people that I talked to that worked there at the time, when Bigelow was running it, actually, Gabe Valdez was under contract to do some cattle mutilation stuff while they were. He was paid by NIDS to do some of that. I think there was and is strange things going on there. I don't think it's just a bunch of stories. And I also think that based on who I talked to, at least the first iteration of it, the Bigelow iteration of it, that the attempt was made to gather scientific data. The problem was just gathering scientific data does not encompass the entirety of what's going on there, just like it doesn't encompass the entirety of the paranormal or UFOs. Simple scientific data does not tell you the whole story. And in fact, they were thwarted in that by cameras turning off and sensors not working and all that other stuff. So I think science can touch this phenomenon, but it can't give us the full picture, which is why I keep pushing for the arts and the humanities and psychology and all these things to be included in the study of UFOs, because that kind of meaning, that the meaning that comes to our lives from those areas is directly reflected in UFO experiences. What else can change your life in 5 minutes? The greatest piece of art in the world, or a really nice movie or whatever, or a song that really touches you, that can change your life in 5 minutes. UFOs can do that too. So there's something going on there that we have to pay attention to. And so right now I've actually been giving lectures on that, and I'm going to try and pursue that as time goes on. And Priscilla disappeared. Oh, there she is.
I had to go yell at the kids. Sorry. They're happily eating goldfish, but kids are very loud when. Oh, now they're not happy. Sorry about that. Yeah, I was like,
It's okay.
go there. Yeah, yeah, but yeah, it's very interesting. It's all such a mind scramble when you think about it. I don't believe in anything anymore, and it's kind of crazy. Like, I remember
Good.
growing up, I was like, they're demons and angels, and then after that, I'm like, no, they're definitely aliens, obviously. And then I start reading about quantum mechanics, and then I'm like, they could be from somewhere else. And then you got the many worlds theories happening. We've got Hal Puthoff's work happening, and the best thing that I heard Jeff Kripal say was the best thing: don't believe your beliefs. And that kind of stuck with me, because how can you, after you actually do the research, how can you? And
No,
there's
it's
like red
everything.
flags, and people are like, it's definitely this, it's definitely that. People on the far end of the spectrum that are like, they're all from Lyra, and I'm a starseed, and they gave me this message, and I'm going to listen to those people, because what if they're right? But at the same time, if and whatever you're in contact with is telling you 100% this is what's happening, you still need to question that as well, because we still
Exactly.
don't know where they actually are from. Something that can play with our perception and tap into our consciousness is very scary, for better or worse, So
Yeah. We also have to remember, and I think Jay would agree with me, we have agency in this. we can direct what's going on, no matter what we're told or what we're told to believe, or even what we're told to believe by whatever entity or whatever's talking to us. I think we can keep our agency in this and be as much as possible detached from whatever that experience is. Now, if it's something that's telling you to, get a cult around you and kill people and all that, probably you shouldn't listen to that. But if something that's telling you to love everybody and to be nice to people and all that, yeah, I'd kind of go along with that.
It's not going to hurt to love more people, right?
Yeah,
exactly. Just giving nice messages.
So it kind of depends on the person you are. I've got another thing I talk about called co-creation, which is like the UFO thing seems to, it interacts with who we are as people, as a person. It'll interact with you, and it will reflect back to you almost like the LSD thing, set and setting. It's going to reflect back to you exactly where you're from and who you are and all that stuff. And that's what you have to work with and realize that that's, maybe flattering you, but it's, whatever it is, uses the raw material, the putty of your personality to create that experience, I think. But you have to realize that, and work with that. That's as far as I can take it right now. I mean, you guys may have different ideas, which I'd like to hear, but that's my idea right now about what we're dealing with. Any others?
I was going to ask Jay if you want to weigh in on that.
No, I'm with you on that. I mean, I think the co-creative hypothesis is and or also what Sean Bruno Hargens talks about as the mutual enactment hypothesis. I think there's kind of a lot of overlap in those two ideas, and I think that there's a lot.
Oh, it's not an original idea at all. Yeah. Exactly.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think that it's really important to think about agency, personal agency, with regard to whether it's, if you're only going to listen to what comes out of Capitol Hill, or you're only going to listen to what comes out of, Cryon or Seth or whoever the heck else, from the channeling literature, or if you're going to listen to or if you're just going to listen to your own intuition and things like that. I mean, I'm with you in terms of, questioning your own beliefs and looking at what kind of predispositions you might have, that might, kind of bewilder oneself when it comes to these topics, and being able to like escape those own mental traps can be really important, right? And so, it goes back to what you were saying right at the outset in terms of being able to hold 3 or 4 or 5 different views or positions at once, and being able to kind of like juggle those, that is a skill set. It's a very, very admirable skill to have, and it can be really challenging, and it can be one of those headache forming situations why people will rage quit the field, left and right, because they can't.
They want it to be something that it isn't.
Yeah.
As soon as you say it's this thing, you're going to have 100 people telling you why that's wrong with the UFO thing. And it's that I've believed that almost from the beginning. That's why our magazine was called The Excluded Middle. Let's find the thing that people aren't screaming about. Let's stay away from the complete skeptic and the complete believer, and see what's there in the middle that nobody really looks at. And it's fun too, Jay. I mean, to juggle all these things. I don't look at it as something that drives me crazy. I'm like, I have fun with the juggling.
Yeah.
It's like,
there's always something to read. There's always something to research. There's always something new that you can look into. It keeps your mind busy for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's something that I find. I think that people look at the base subjects and they go in a pyramid and they think that eventually they're going to get to this peak. But what I found from getting to that peak is that it suddenly opens up again into an even bigger possibility. So many things, and that's why I think it's too easy to look at this from the comfort of your own chair online. Get out there, do boots on the ground research. Look at it for yourself. Don't follow the mainstream narrative all the time. Don't sit and wait for answers. Go and ask the questions. Go and get your feet dirty, and you'll find some blessings in that, I think.
And the other cool thing about this is I've met so many great people and I've made so many great friends and so many intelligent people that just totally inspire me. Like, what other subject can do that?
Yeah.
I mean, I've met completely crazy people, and I've met people that are so smart it scares me. And it's wonderful.
Yeah,
You're not lying. Sometimes I
completely.
talk to people, I'm like, I am a freaking potato compared to this person. Like, I'm like, I don't want to sit
Exactly. But
next to
that
you anymore in
excites me
class.
because I want to understand what they're saying, and I want to catch
Right.
up with them, and I want to make the effort to give myself a headache to understand what they're
Oh,
talking
for
about.
sure.
Because there might be some gold there for me.
Yeah, it pushes your mental boundaries, too, and it's good for us to do that as humans.
Mhm.
So what are you working on now? Can you talk about that? Like, are you working on any specific thing now that we can?
We're almost done with our ufology tarot deck.
Oh my
The
God.
the major arcana. The major
Oh my,
arcana is
I've been
taking a year.
following that. I've been following that. That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
That's very cool.
The one that Miguel Romero, the artist in the group,
Mhm.
just finished was the Wheel of Fortune, which is basically we said, what are we going to do with the Wheel of Fortune? Everybody kind of takes over a card, I guess, in some way. And my idea at the beginning of that card was that the wheel just keeps turning, right?
Mm.
It's like, well, that's like ufology. It's, here, this thing
Oh,
comes
so
over and
perfect.
over and over and over and over and over again. So in the upper left, we have a space brother. In the upper right, we have I think Assyrian, the Zoroastrian being, the guy that's sitting on the winged vehicle that people
Okay.
say is a UFO or whatever it probably is.
The Anunnaki guy on the UFO chair.
Yeah, lower right, there's the 4 quadrants. On the original card, it's the eagle, the bull,
Oh
the
God,
man.
guys! Now he's talking tarot. You can't leave. You can't leave. I'm a card reader, so I've been following that deck. That is so cool. Go on. So you have
lower
the
right, there's a crashed UFO, and lower left is the Cash Landro. And so that represent the Space Brothers stuff, the ancient aliens stuff, the crashed UFO, mythos, and then 4, the government. The crashed UFO meaning, disclosure and all that. And the other one is the military connection because of Cash Landrum. And so, and at the top of the wheel is a homunculus of the man and the woman from the Voyager craft. It's male and female. One's pointing up, one's pointing down. And instead of a snake coming down the left side, like in the Rider-Waite Smith tarot, there is 2 intertwined snakes that look like DNA with the lines between them. Wow. And on the right, there's a symbol for Algol instead of the Anubis character, representing the internet and algorithms. That's and amazing. that part of it. So this wheel just goes around and around and around and around and around. So we're just trying to tell everybody, maybe you should get off that wheel.
Right, like we're like little hamsters sometimes. I'm super. That's like 2 of my favorite things. Like my husband's always like, "Don't buy any more tarot decks." I'm like, "Well, there's one I'm waiting for when they finish it." So at least getting one more.
Yeah, well, we're gonna finish in the next month. We're gonna finish the major arcana with a book along with it. If you were in the Kickstarter, you get one that explains every card. Got about an 600-word essay on each card. Who is on the card, what it means, some of the Easter eggs, not all of them. And what the idea was when I was sitting alone in a cafe about 5 years ago was just like, oh, wow, what if I combined ufology with tarot? What would happen? And I presented it to my group and they were like, oh, geez, we're doing that. So for the past 2 years, that's all we've been doing. And we set up the Kickstarter and we meet every week and we talk about each card for somewhere between 10 and 20 hours. Discussion on each card, who's going to be on it, what's the symbolism, and then if we can, we write to the person and ask them, because there's 3 of them on there that are actually living people that are still here. Jacques Vallée's the magician, Whitley Strieber's the fool, which he picked. I asked him because I didn't. Fool's
not bad in tarot, if
it's
you
not.
Don't.
People say that, oh, he's the fool. It's like no,
it's not like
you
fool. It's like a young soul going out onto an adventure.
Yeah, so we have him actually walking with a giant key because of the book, The Key. Behind him is his cabin with an owl flying up over it. In the sky, there's a boomerang UFO, and on the other side, there's the big alien from the cover of Communion. His 2 cats are with him that were with him in the cabin. He sent us pictures of his cats so we could include them on the card. And he's walking off a cliff. And the cats, on the card, the Rider-Waite Smith, the dog's going, no, don't do it.
Yeah,
whatever, because they're cats.
Cats don't care. They'll jump off the cliff.
And Whitley's walking off the cliff, and he's just looking into the sky like this, and he's, and it's just, to us, it just symbolizes Whitley just went straight off the cliff,
So
and he knew
perfect.
exactly what he was doing. And, you know, so when he saw the card, he said, "Oh my God, that's perfect." I was so happy when he said that. So, and then Jenny Randalls was the other living person. That's the high priestess, and she loved hers too. Yeah,
It's beautiful.
but there's just it's just we tried to cram everything in there that we could possibly find out about the people's lives. Like Jenny, she has a lot of cats. She's like a cat lady. So we put a little tiny cat pin on her. Miguel did on her suit, on her blazer, on her dress. I mean, actually,
The art's been amazing for them that you've been that's awesome.
Rosemary Ellen Guiley is Temperance, and she's got one foot in the water with a lake monster grabbing her leg, and then behind her, instead of that row of irises or whatever, there's some woods and a Bigfoot's running away.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, you're having fun with it, but I love how it's still sticking with so much of the symbology as you're explaining it of the Rider Wyatt. So you can have fun with it. There's so many decks out there that do that, but there's no good UFO ones. So I'm very excited for you guys to finish.
Thank you. That's the project that's like right in front of my face right now that I'm really totally paying attention to and really excited about. And they'll be sent out probably we said fall, but we're going to, what Kickstarter has come in on time. So we're probably going to send them out in January.
Right. I didn't see it till like way later. I think I barely saw it. Like maybe
we're printing extras.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I better go to the Kickstarter before anybody listens to this and goes and gets the extras. So what we like to do in book club at the end, we can hang out longer too, but before I forget, we recommend a book, and Graham didn't want to recommend a book because he's being a brat. But would you like to recommend a book? What we do is we put them in a hat and we pick for like next month what we're going to read until we meet again. So would you like to recommend a book, Craig?
Oh, wow. There's so many. Oh my God. Angels and Aliens by Keith Thompson is really good.
It'll go in the hat.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, anything by Valet, but you've probably already done that. Anything by John Keel, but you've already done that. People of the Web by Greg Little, who's still around and you can have on your show.
That would be cool. That's kind of like the aim. You know, we've had it's hard to get, obviously, like, we couldn't get a hold of Valet and he's busy, but we've read his books. That's just our goal, is to get people reading, about UFOs. So
yeah, off the top of my head, those would be really good ones. And Josh Cutchin's book, his latest one, The Ecology of Souls. That's impressing a lot of people right now. And he's a friend of mine, so yeah, get his book.
Awesome. So Jay, what did you bring for this month?
Oh, let's see. What would be too good? Well, I did just get my copy of the UFO
Kelly's
Rabbit Hole by Kelly Chase, who is buddies with all of us, and we're going to see her in a few weeks out here in New York. And she was maybe going to even be here today, but she had something else she had to do. But let's see, maybe that or I kind of would love to do like Missing Time by Bud Hopkins. I think that'd be really fun. It's a really classic book that has a lot of boots on the ground, investigative reporting in the early sections of the book. It's kind of a stone cold classic, and it's pretty fun. So I don't know. I just picked two books, and that's wrong of me.
We're gonna. I feel like we're gonna put Kelly's book in. We're gonna put Kelly's book in because it's Kelly.
All right, there you go. All right, sounds good.
Yeah, Bud Hopkins is on one of our cards.
Yeah.
Sorry about the screaming in the back.
Oh, that's all right.
The gremlins ate. I was upstairs getting ready for this, and my husband comes home because him and my son, my 5-year-old, just did his first little 10K today with my husband this morning. And he comes home and he's like, "Did you let Vance," that's my 3-year-old, "eat chocolate chips?" And I come downstairs and he had climbed into the cupboard and was just eating handfuls of chocolate chips, like the baking chocolate chips.
Oh, no.
The trickster must be heard.
Yep.
My issue with that is how you say little and 10K.
Yeah,
I got out of it, guys. I was supposed to go too.
Just a little
but,
10K.
but my husband's like, it's going to be cold, and I don't know if Vance is going to make it. I'm like, oh yeah, Vance. I'll stay with him because I'm not. They're all my husband and my son are all the energy. My oldest son, so he took my spot. He got his little trophy. Anyways, Vinny.
You know, I always like to keep it kind of with my friends,
Local.
and I think I probably did this last month, but I'm going to go with UFO Files by my good friend Dr. David Clarke. Keeping it UK.
Love it.
Very good book. And I've never been picked either.
I know. I know.
It's gonna happen.
All right, Nathan.
All right, so I've got John Mack's Abduction.
Ooh.
What's
Always
interesting
good.
about this, Greg, is that if you look at the back, the very first comment recommendation for this book on the back cover is Keith Thompson, author of Angels and Aliens. So I want to put that in for a recommendation as well.
All right.
Yeah, he's on our card too. Bud Hopkins, Leo Sprinkle, and John Mack are on the Chariot.
Awesome. That's beautiful.
Good choice.
Priscilla, what's your book? Do you have a book?
I didn't
She chose
have one. I
Kelly's.
don't know if you guys are going to want to read it, but I read it when it came out, but I got like a signed copy yesterday.
Uh-huh.
So I kind of want to reread it. UFO Investigation Methodology for a New Age by Richard Lang.
Okay.
So I met him yesterday. I was
Deep
so
cut.
nervous because he's just, I don't know why, but he was super chill, and people are so nice. I just think that I have like, if a man looks stern, I'm like, oh, he's mean, but he ended up being really nice. So that's going to be my book. And I think that it's something a lot of people should read if they want to investigate more, because it's kind of like step by step, this is what you should do. And he has his own personal insight, and I just think it's cool. So you guys are probably praying that a methodology book doesn't get picked, but Richard Lang. Oh, where's my
Caught me
hand?
at the end of a COVID bout, which I've never had before, so I'm
Oh,
still
no.
coughing a little bit.
That's I've been coughing. I'm telling you, like, I keep getting sick because my son goes to school and brings things home.
Yeah, they're disease sponges. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They really are. And then they like touch their face, and they want to touch your face, and
Sneeze right in your face.
oh my gosh, yeah. Like, I'm leaving the house yesterday. I look down, I'm like, I gotta change my shirt. There's like kid boogers on me. Move all, you just sometimes you just leave with it. You're like, I don't even care. My husband's married. I'm married. I don't have to impress anybody outside the house. All right. So this is our UAP secrecy hat, or it was all fuzzy because it fell on the ground. All right.
I'm just
What's this
looking
one?
at some of the comments.
Guess what we picked, and I'm super excited. Kelly's book.
Yeah, that's
Just
All
right.
right. All right. That's going to be
Kelly
great.
Chase.
That's awesome.
That is
All right.
awesome.
Fantastic.
We'll have her
Lethal
on. We can
Street.
rip it to shreds right in front of her.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be good.
Excellent.
It's definitely going to be good.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm
man.
excited.
Greg, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been
Yes,
amazing.
Sure, I really
Yeah,
enjoyed
great.
it. This is
Really
like,
nice.
I sometimes I get tired of talking about the book, but this was actually really fun. So thank
No,
you.
anything
Thank you so
goes. That's why I
much.
try to ask the guests, like, is there anything that you want to talk about? What are you doing now? Because some of these books are great, and your book is great. It still is. But at the same time, like, people move on and they write other things, and people
Yeah.
tend to focus on like their most impactful or their first book.
Yeah.
So
It's a
I'm glad.
15-year-old book, I think.
Yeah, but
Actually,
it's
at this
needed, isn't it? It's scary how it's needed right now, though. Like, people need to read that to be reminded.
Yeah, thank
everything.
you. Yeah, it's kind of a lesson. It's a spy book with UFO trappings. That's kind of how I thought of it. And yeah, I mean, the themes I think are still, as you say, they're still relevant. So thanks for having me on to talk about it.
Yes, thank you so much for coming. And I think that Jay said he had to go now. I'm going to end the live. Thank you to everybody in the chat that showed up. I really appreciate you. Share, like, subscribe, all that stuff. Make sure you go into the description and follow everybody here. I have Greg's information. I have everybody's like social media and websites in the description. So go follow them. Thank you to anybody listening on Anomalous Podcast Network, to audio only or audio only in general on YouTube. And please just keep coming, keep reading. And I look forward to seeing everybody next week. Next week, it's going to get a little witchy. I'm having a hoodoo practitioner on. So she's going to talk about cleansing. And she's also just released a pocketbook of demonic names for the paranormal investigator and exorcist. So that should be pretty fun. Everybody hang out for a minute afterwards and have a great night.